We're looking at this is a nice chapter. We've done this one a couple of times, but it's always very helpful because it's focusing on the turning virtues to vice. I'm sorry, turning vices to virtue. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We have to turn the vices to virtues. So conquering vice implies simply the bringing of our nature, our natural inclination and impulses back to that condition originally intended for them by God, who implanted them in us. Thus the appetite, let me just read it. The conquering vice implies simply the bringing of our natural inclinations and impulses back to their condition originally intended for them by God, who implanted them in us. If you really think about it, the reason people can't separate themselves from vice is because they live their whole life thinking about themselves. Everything has to do with pleasuring themselves. And whatever that is, and there you go. You've got all the vices. Do you see? If someone stops living for themselves, they're able to start working on this. This is why there's so many problems in marriage, there's so many problems in religious life, there's so many problems with people with authority. Everybody's seeking the things that are their own and not of Jesus Christ. Do you see? That's the point. So trying to just simply, and people, I can't tell you how many people tell me they're doing novena after novena after novena just so God will take some vice away from them. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it might work that way for somebody, but the prayer is to give you grace to turn things back to their original intention during the actual fighting. And the first step in that is just forgetting about yourself and pleasuring yourself. Thus, the appetite for personal greatness, as we have noted before, was given man that he might strive after all that is sublime and heavenly, despising mundane and evil things, and even as unworthy of himself. So despising mundane and evil things as unworthy of himself. That doesn't happen unless somebody sees themselves outside of themselves. Meaning they identify themselves according to the dignity that they're raised to, not the dignity they feel, because people think horrible things about themselves all the time. So it has to do with the fact of, who are you? Now, when somebody works for McDonald's, they know they represent McDonald's. So you can't take every coffee and throw it in somebody's face, right? Because you're going to get in trouble. You're not allowed to work for McDonald's if you do that. You're wearing the shirt, okay? You got to represent McDonald's. So the thing is, when we're Christians and christened into Christ, we represent Christ. No matter how bad you feel about yourself, it doesn't matter how bad you feel about yourself. It matters whether or not you actually are a Christian or not, and that happens by baptism. So because of that, whether you recognize it, it doesn't matter, because you're recognized that way by the demons. Do you see? Angels and demons both recognize you as a Christian. Whether you feel filthy or worthy or unworthy, it doesn't matter. You're identified as a Christian. Even if you're in mortal sin, you're a Christian. Meaning that if you go to hell, you're in hell as a Christian. Do you see? So the point here is simply being made, it's an identification of someone's dignity. And then you live according to that dignity. So you have to live, you're living according to what you can see outside of yourself, of who you actually are. You know when you see that McDonald's person that works at McDonald's proudly wearing the hat and the t-shirt, and they're posing for the picture that says it's trying to get more recruits to work at McDonald's. You see that this is a person who's trying to, in a dignified way, represent McDonald's. Is McDonald's a bad choice? Walmart.
Chick-fil-A.
No. I don't want to go through all of them. But something where you're wearing a t-shirt, you're wearing a shirt that says something, and that's who you know what I'm saying. But you know you're able to think about what that person's supposed to be doing. Anybody who's representing some other group has to know what that group is. And you'll see that in people, like, when FedEx, it's hard to say nowadays because everybody's just kind of like intentionally a bum, and they go around treating everybody badly and having no sense of that they're wearing their pajamas in the middle of the airport. But there used to be an idea that like you worked for a place and you represented that place. People can understand that. They're not just acting like themselves. They're saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You're like, even on the phone, they'll thank you for, like, yesterday I got in a car appointment or something because the car is busted. So you call the people up, and at the end, they're saying this spiel. They're not going to say that every time they get off the phone with somebody. Thank you for calling me today. We really appreciate your business. You don't say that when you call somebody's house. But when you call that place of business, that lady's going to say, thank you very much for calling and thinking and relying on our services and whatever else. They have this thing to say because they represent that company. We represent Christ, the Son of the living God. And so there has to be an idea of what that means, what that dignity is, so that you know how to live according to that dignity. It isn't about all the internal feelings. Oh, I feel this, so I do that. I wish God would just alleviate that from me. I get mad, and so I act this way. Whatever the tendency is, well, I just feel that inside, so I do that. I wish God would just take that away. It isn't about God taking it away. It's about you identifying who you are and living according to the dignity of what a Christian actually is. So, despising mundane and evil things that are unworthy of him. So, understanding the dignity. Now is the reverse the case. The appetite is debased, and man stained after earthly honor and things false and empty. It's talking about pride. Now, what about envy? The spirit of envy is given to man, not that he may envy his neighbor's goods or wish him harm, but that, detesting evil in himself and others, he may envy the devil. What does that mean? That he may envy the devil and grudge him the many souls he snatches from God. Do you see that one? So not only are you willing to sacrifice your own life because it's enough, he's had enough. You envy that he gets too many souls. You're not going to give him yours. Now you envy the fact that he gets too many souls, so you're going to fight for other people. Like Our Lady said, there's nobody to pray and suffer for these people. That's why they're all going to hell. Do you see? It's envy of the devil. He's winning out and getting all these people to go to hell. What we tend to do according to our concupiscence is we tend to say, well, so-and-so has a girlfriend and does the... Well, we don't say this, but people say this out in the world. So-and-so has a girlfriend and does these other things, so they're not all going to go to hell, so we can do those things. Do you see? This called scandal. You see people living a certain way that isn't appropriate, and then you start to justify, well, they can't all go to hell because they're nice people, so I can do those things too because we're not all going to go to hell, and nice people do these things. It's the same scandal that parents give to their children with the phones and with all the other things that they bring into the house they shouldn't be bringing in, but they justify it or they tell the kids no or whatever. The kids do it anyways. So we envy the devil and grudge him the many souls he snatches from God. The devil has helpers and abaters, teachers of heresy and subverters of souls, who despoil many of their eternal happiness, and may even be said to despoil the very blessed in heaven of the added joy. Do you see? Because in hell, everyone that's added to hell makes you more miserable. Everyone that's added to heaven makes you more happy, if you can say that. Because you're so pleased at someone else who did what? Who worshiped God, who gave glory and honor to God. That's what they're actually pleased about. Do you see? The reason to want to go to heaven isn't... See, this is the problem, is people, they get confused because going to heaven's all about them. Whereas you'll get to heaven because you don't want to dishonor God. You want to give God the glory and honor he deserves. And what he deserves is that you go to heaven. You see, we think about it all wrong. It's all about God. It's not about us. See, in heaven, you want everybody to come. In hell, you don't want anybody to go there. But that's only because their presence will make you more miserable. For every soul in heaven adds by his presence the joy of the rest, to the joy of the rest. But this without prejudice to the rulings of eternal predestination, which allow no defect in heaven. That's the thing that really gets people. They try to justify where they can keep doing a certain thing and that God will understand. No imperfections in heaven. Can't be possible. These then who seek our eternal loss are the enemies we should hate. Not those who, though they may seem to be enemies, still share with us the hope of eternal glory and fellowship in heaven. That means anybody on earth. We have enemies on earth only in the sense that these are people that are trying to cause our damnation, right? But we don't despise them or hate them. We can't hate anybody on earth. We can't hate them. We can only hate the enemies of God, in as much as they're enemies of God. So like Muslims that are actively fighting against the faith, we can't individually hate them. You can't hate any of them. You can hate what they're doing. We desire their good. We desire everybody's good. But we can hate what people are doing. We hate people inside the church that are trying to destroy the church, which seems the greatest enemy of the church today is the church itself. I mean, the people in the church. But we don't hate those individuals. We hate what they're doing. Do you see? We desire their salvation. No matter how badly they treat us or the wrongs that they inflict on us, we do not hate. We cannot hate any of them. We hate what they're doing. Anger. Man is given the inclination to anger that he may rouse himself against vice and evil suggestions, that he may confront them with indignation and never suffer himself to be led to give assent to them, that he may repress evil. You can't even say that word nowadays. I get mad when you say repress. That he may repress evil in himself and to the best of his ability in others, that he may repair the injury done to God and his violated justice. It's like St. Bernardine of Siena when he was out in town square and the guy came up and told him kind of a dirty joke. St. Bernardine just smacked him in the face. Right in public. I think he was, what was he? Was he like a distinguished individual of the town? And he comes up and tells him a dirty joke, so he just smacks him in the face. That's pretty good. This is that zeal for justice of which our Lord's stern denunciation of the Pharisees and other evildoers, Matthew 23:13, Luke 11:42, are an example. And in the lives of many holy persons we find the same. But now this aptitude has been deformed, and its balance lost, is wont to change into a variety of fury and madness. That's why anger is so bad. See, what it's saying here is anger can be a virtue. It really can be a virtue. Our Lord fashioning a whip and going into the temple and wreaking havoc on those men, that was a virtue. But he didn't lose control of the one thing that makes it, because they say everybody's nowadays, they're a human, they're a homosexual, or they're a homo something or other, or they're a homo whatever. We're homo sapiens. That has to do with sapience. It has to do with wisdom. Men of wisdom, men of reason. Do you see? Because of our nature is reasonable. We have the ability to use reason. Anything that goes contrary to reason is sinful. And anger that allows you to lose your reason, just like drinking alcohol isn't bad, but drinking alcohol to the loss of reason is sinful. Anything that loses a reason is sinful. So here, anger can lead to that. And that's what they're talking about. So its balance is lost. It's wont to change into a veritable fury and madness. A man is though bereft of sense. He will turn against his fellows, friends, and neighbors, nay, even against his very self. The saints and even God himself are not exempt from his onslaught. And he will sometimes pursue with his anger those creatures which are devoid of sense. Like they'll go around beating a cat, right? Throwing the cat against the wall or something like that. Because they've lost all sense of... So they're gonna chase the cat around and kick the cat. Nice cats. We can't kick cats. No kicking cats. Don't kick the cat. There are times when we recognize the utter reasonableness of our anger and yet are unable to control it. Yeah. Sloth. Man is meant to sorrow over his own sins and the sins of others, to bewail his exile, to fear hell, to grieve over his shortcomings, and to share the grief of others. Sorrow, such as this, grave and purposeful, banishes idle levity, whence dissoluteness of behavior springs. And that's why it's important even in, like in the friary, we don't see this here, but you do see this out in the world. You see it in some religious communities. If there's immaturity in a religious vocation, and you see it all the time out in the world, when someone's down, they're down. When someone's happy, they're super duper happy. And when they're super duper happy, they enter in all that levity. Do you see? And that's what it's talking about here. There's a type of this kind of sorrow that we should have over our sins, a proper kind of sorrow. It banishes that kind of levity. It should draw towards a type of consistency. A constancy is the virtue. Constancy. So though you're really sad, you don't allow it to affect you. Though you're really, really happy, you don't allow it to bust its limits, right? You thank God for being happy, but you don't go around just being bubbly everywhere you go and singing out loud and spinning in the hallways. That kind of thing we don't do in the religious life. It's better you can bubble up. You can bubble up and spin around internally. Does that make sense? Is that a weird way to say it? Sorrow such as this, grave and purposeful, banishes idle levity, whence dissoluteness or behavior springs. But this sorrow which is good, so much according to God, as St. Paul puts it, 2 Corinthians 7:10, has been perverted and transformed into that sorrow of the world, which worketh death, into despair and a sense of hopelessness and groundless depression. I was asked the other day how to know the difference between like sorrow, a good sorrow, and kind of the almost like the depression. And this is from a religious. And obviously the way you can tell the difference is one is of a very negative nature. The other is of a very sweet nature. Being sorrowful for sin is a very sweet thing. It doesn't draw you down where you start hating yourself and everybody around you and wishing that you'd be struck by lightning at some point soon. It doesn't create any kind of negativity inside of you. It doesn't start to call you names. You see? You can see in the negative sorrow, it pulls you down to where everything starts getting dark and you just want to go to sleep and never wake up. That's a bad sorrow. That's not from God. Negative things are never from God. I mean, God will allow negative things to happen to us because he's going to bring good from it. But this kind of sorrow God's not going to allow a deep depression on you. He'll allow you to fall into something called desolation. But desolation's different. It's a smack in the face for a son of his that isn't being faithful. They're not in mortal sin, but they're just simply not being faithful. So he smacks them in the face and they pout over it. Do you see? That's desolation. But depression, there's clinical stuff, and I'm not talking about that. I don't know anything about that kind of thing. But at least a normal kind of depression that people get into, these are things that have to be mortified, because now you're dealing with someone who's just sulking in their sorrow, and it's a me thing. They're turning and looking at themselves and wanting to feel worse and worse and worse. It's selfishness. Does that make sense? Whereas a normal kind of sorrow, the good kind of sweet sorrow, is like what St. Francis wanted. He wanted to continuously weep for his sins, whether he was going to go blind or not, because there was such a sweetness and being sorry for not cooperating with God's grace from the very moment of his life. You think of 𝐂𝐿𝐃𝐄, he wept when he was in his 60s or something like that, because he would reflect on the fact that he was under Satan's control for more than 24 hours. He was born in the middle of the night. At his house there at Pietrelcina, now, for some reason, their house is like all these rooms, these stone rooms along this kind of walkway. They didn't have like a big house. Like the kitchen was here, and then across the sidewalk was like another room, and then down a little bit was the bedroom. So it was all these kind of, it's a stone town. I mean, but that's what he had. So where he was born, and the bed's still there, and he was born in, right out the door, it said there's a slope, and it's just like these, in those towns, they don't have like stairs. It's like a stone thing, but just kind of has these little stone things in there so you can walk up it, but they're not like the stairs we talk about it. Well, basically they lived at the back and on the side of the church. So that little walkway is leading you to the front of the church, Our Lady or Grace or something like that. And but still, it was at nighttime. So the mom wasn't going to kick in the door and baptize the baby. They had to wait for the priest to come. But it was still within 24 hours. But because of that, he wept over that. That's a sweet, probably the only sin he ever had. It's like an original sin, but he still wept over the thing. I mean, that's a sweet kind of sorrow. It's not a bad sorrow. And that's how we know the difference. Like St. Francis wasn't beating himself up internally, even though like he was telling, who was it, Brother Leo, or what was the brother who kept telling him to step on his neck? Brother Bernard, that's right. He kept telling him to step on his neck and say he was a horrible sinner and all this stuff, and Brother Bernard wouldn't do it, even though he was trying to, but God wouldn't let him do it. But St. Francis was, there's a playfulness and a joyfulness in even this thing playing out. He's not beating himself up like he's a slave of Satan. And that's what happens in depression, is we let ourselves, again, I'm not talking about the clinical stuff. I'm talking about the depression we let come on. Basically what happens there, God sees that we're turning internally. He withdraws a little bit and lets you just get completely beat up with temptations. All you have to do to get past those temptations is shoo them away. It's just like shooing flies. That's the only thing that happens. I mean, if you're stuck outside in the summertime next to a hot garbage can of trash and there's flies there, but you refuse to move, you have to breathe that air, you have to deal with those flies, and you have to be in that environment. But to simply get up and walk away from it means you're not by the hot trash can, the hot trash in the summertime with all the flies and everything. Does that make sense? It's an active thing you have to do. You have to stand up and you have to walk away. But for someone who just says, I'm just stuck here. I'm just stuck here next to the hot trash can in the summertime, and you got a bunch of baby diapers in there that have been there for like 3-4 days at 90 degrees, and all the flies, so they're all over the place and they're landing on your forehead, and there's just nothing you can do about it. That's the kind of depression that we allow ourselves to be kind of immersed in. Joy. Beyond question, man is meant to be happy in God because it is the object of the will, and God, which is good, and God is all good. The aptitude for joy is given him for this end, and in the hope of winning a joy that is eternal, in the present relish of God's goodness to him. He is meant too to rejoice with his neighbor in the good that is his, and to find delight in praising God and working for God. Vain and useless interests should hold no appeal for him. This is why we rage against the phones. Do you see? People out in the world, they just can't get it. They get mad at you for saying anything. They want to justify their movies. They want to justify their phones. They want to justify all their wasting of time and try to see how each one of those things is really kind of good in a way. Can't you do good there? It doesn't matter if it's good or not good. The problem is you're just wasting all of your time. You're here to do one of the most heroic and beautiful things you can do, obtain heaven. And you're not going to do it. You're just going to sit there looking at your phone and watching movies and stuff and trying to justify why that movie's okay to watch. Do you see? And they get mad. Anybody tells you it's not right to do. See, show me where it's written. This is the legalism, right? Show me where it's written. The swing dancing. You can't do the swing dancing. Show me where the church has a document. So vain and useless interests should hold no appeal for him, but only those that are divine. Let's think about the other day, like, what do you say to the parents who, they want to justify movie night with the kids? Because there's really nothing wrong with movie night. I mean, in some regard for people. It's not like you're going to say it's horribly sinful to watch a simple saint movie that doesn't have anything bad in it. But how do you deal with that? What they did before. I mean, Dad used to sit down and read the kids a story. And then later on, the kids would be like, Dad used to read us these stories. And they're beautiful, those stories. You have the lives of the saints and whatever else. There's 101 ways you can fill your time. But the point is, men are lazy today. And that's why it's easier to put on the movie, sit down, you don't have to do anything. Mom and Dad don't have to think about activities with the kids. They don't actually have to engage them in any meaningful way. They can just sit there, eat popcorn, and laugh at things they shouldn't be watching. Do you see? That's kind of that's how people grow up today. And thus should he grow keen and eager in God's service. So let me read it again. Vain and useless interest should hold no appeal for him. This all goes back to that dignity, seeing that dignity of who we actually are, and living zealously according to that dignity until our last breath. And of course, that doesn't happen without making meditations and trying to understand who you are and being able to reflect on what that dignity is, who you're actually being, and who the dignity you're supposed to be, and then keep conforming yourself to the dignity that you're supposed to be by God's grace. So vain and useless interests should hold no appeal for him, but only those that are divine, and thus should he grow keen and eager in God's service. But now this aptitude, let me just put one more thing. People out in the world, they like to say, but that's for you religious. It's not for us out here in the world. They think because they decided to stay out in the world, they can be of the world and still get to heaven. And this is the misunderstanding of what a Christian dignity is. It means we're to be in the world and not of it. But they want to be of the world and still be freed from it. You see, is the difference. And that's why most of them will be lost. Because they won't live according to their dignity. They want their, they want their cake and they want to eat it too. But now this aptitude has been turned aside towards what is idle and dissolute, telephones, movies, swing dancing. And man finds his delight in insaniis fallacies, as the psalmist puts it in Psalm 39:5 from the Dewey. In worldly affluence, in honors and pleasures, in laughter and scorn of others, in idle tales and unworthy amusements. It sounds like parish life today. Doesn't that sound like parish life? Let me read it again. In worldly affluence, in honors and pleasures, in laughter and scorn of others, in idle tales and unworthy amusements. Does it? Is it too much? He finds nothing but distaste in all that is spiritual. The offices of the church weary him. And this isn't the case. They like to go to Mass, sacramental machine. But nobody really wants to do much more, is what it tends to be. They like all the solemn liturgies. They want all the singing and stuff like that. They want a Magnificat that lasts 30 minutes. But, kind of just being there and constantly doing the prayers. Keeping the spiritual life. That's the thing that most people have a distaste for. Finding nothing but distaste in all that's spiritual, the offices of the church weary him. He has no energy for holy and devout activities, especially meditation. When they're out in the world, this is it. They don't want to meditate because it's too much energy. Fighting off the distractions. Meaning, the more distractions there are, it means the more stuff they got in their life they shouldn't have there, is usually what it means. There's also a fight that has to happen in the beginning for everybody to get that to go away. But his mind is ever at work on useless, vain, and dangerous thoughts. And rather than concentrate upon spiritual and holy things, he will undertake any amount of active occupation, however laborious, so he doesn't have to make a meditation in the morning. That's how you finish that sentence. The spiritual duties of his state, which is anxious, state he is anxious to have done with as expeditiously as possible, and he takes no pain whatever with them, unless they happen to be an occasion of winning praise or profit or some material benefit of that kind. See, it's all the thinking about himself. They're the center of their spirituality. It is true that weariness in well-doing, a sense of futility, a feeling that holiness is not worth winning or even thinking about, may arise from sheer depression. But the same may also be caused by dissoluteness of life. Now, just that sheer, this is true when you start to feel that sheer depression of being completely run down, feeling that way. But how do you get past it? Well, you feel it and you identify it. You identify that you feel miserable. Everything feels dark. You feel like you can't climb out of it. And then you praise God for it. That's the point. It's like you don't just start grumbling in it, because you can see yourself climbing deeper and deeper inside yourself. That's exactly what you do in hell. And so you're starting to enter into hell in some capacity. But the way you get past it is you just identify that you feel miserable today. And you beg the grace not to bite anybody's head off. And then you thank God for all of his goodness that he's still giving to you that you can't see. But you know by faith that he gives it to you. It's by faith. Do you see? So it's not a problem that you feel a thing. It's a problem that you engage it. It's also not a problem that you mess up because you feel so bad. It's a problem that you don't apologize for it, or that you don't make reparation for it, or you don't strive harder to overcome it. You just as you keep embracing it and allowing it to take you over, that's where the problem is. That's actually your fault. For as long as we are busy over vain trifles, it's like basically being out in the world nowadays, we shall certainly have no relish for what is spiritual, and shall be ill at ease when duty compels us to tear ourselves away from idle. I wrote something in here. Idle and defamatory talk. And get down to serious business. Spiritual tasks will become as irksome to us as are the chains and posts to the dogs temporarily tied up there too. This is the vice of sloth, a disgust for what is good. Many, even religious, become entangled in it, and few are wholly delivered from an occasional breath of it. Avarice. An inclination to avarice has been given to man that he may yearn for great merit in God's eyes. That's called grace hogs. Do you see that? Does it make sense? That's what we call a grace hog, which is a good thing. Grace hog's a good thing. An inclination to avarice has been given to man that he may yearn after greater merits in God's eyes, and to this end, that he may have opportunity of accomplishing many and big things for him, for God. Do you see? Living a life to do as much as you can to give glory and honor to God. He has all of eternity, but we have a short little amount of time. He made us for him, so it's somebody just striving to give as much as they can to him. Now, how do you see that? It's not just, what they would show the saints, like, they built this hospital, and they built this place, and they built that place, and they did this thing, and they went over and did that thing. No, it's about the everyday activities of doing big things for him by way of virtue. These things can be greater than hospitals, do you see? It's their virtue that lead to the hospital. It's not the building the hospital. It will not allow him to rest satisfied with what he has, but will induce him to strive his hardest to increase divine grace in his soul and to widen the scope of his spiritual activities. It will inspire him constantly in his own interior life and in his effort to win souls by prayer, by instruction, and by the helpful example of a good life. See, that's a life that's completely selfless. It's focused on being that person that they're supposed to be in God's eyes and not going after all their own pleasures and stuff like that. This is someone who, though they're exhausted, is willing to give a good word to somebody. Though they don't have any time, they're willing to stop and talk to this person because it might benefit their soul. They're making themselves available, and that's very much part of our consecration, is making ourselves available whenever and however we have to be, and not just, sometimes it means we have to drop a bunch of stuff and do a thing. Do you see? But now it has all dropped down into a lust for temporal things, money, possessions, anything, in fact, however worthless, and man strains to amass these things as though he himself were to live forever, whilst the world was on the verge of slipping through his fingers. The virtue today is that you get a deal on what you're trying to amass. Do you see? You're trying to amass the big house, the nice car, all this stuff, but you got a deal on it, right? You saved some money. That's the virtue. Do you see? That's the virtue now, because that's poverty. Poverty is how you can have the luxury car, but you got it at a discount. Oh, to be American. He seems to hoard to his utmost, lest a perishing world should leave him destitute, just as Noah long ago, with the flood upon him, gathered up all the food he could before destruction should engulf it. And the nearer death draws on, the more assiduously does he gather and guard. And so may all men see how irrational a thing is avarice, hoarding the more as the need grows less. Irrational indeed. As would be vast preparations for a one-day journey, or the building of a great house for one night's rest. That makes a lot of sense, huh? Purposely has God left us in ignorance of the hour of our death, that we may think little of all we may at any moment lose, and much of what belongs to the eternal, to life eternal, to which we are ever hastening. The inclination to food. This is the last one. The appetite for food is given us for the body's sake, that we may support our physical powers and carry on our service of God, gaining much merit thereby. See, it's not for taking pictures of. People take pictures of it. I wasn't part of that culture. You all know more about taking pictures of food than I do, and putting on social media and things. That was after my time. Before my time? After my time. A moderate and sparing use of food, together with a uniform diet, tends to prolong life. For in this way, and if you remember, you all were out there in the world. The older you get, the more you have less to do. You got work and stuff to do, but you don't go do fun stuff anymore because you're older. Unless you just want to get an RV and drive around the world and stuff. But usually what you do when you get a little bit older is you're just always thinking about the next meal. Like what place to go get that steak, or what place to go get this chicken, or what place to go get that fish, or what place to go get... You're constantly thinking about the next meal. You think about a Christian. Like we were put here to go to heaven. And all you're thinking about is the next thing you're going to put into your body that's going to go into the toilet. And how much that's going to cost. Do you see? What we can get. No one thinks about it when it's going back into the toilet. They don't associate it with Golden Corral. I just really was looking forward to that Golden Corral because they got that. It's that yogurt. What's it called? The yogurt spread. It's a yogurt machine, yeah. And the kids just run back. That's all you do. That's all you eat the whole time you're there is like ice cream. Think about it. To name it that, you'd think no one's going to ever come here because of their dignity. But no, those parking lots are packed. You drive past and see that? People love going Golden Corral. Just the name of it. Don't know what else to say about it. So a moderate and sparing use of food together with a uniform diet tends to prolong life. For in this way our bodily powers are renewed without being overburdened, and the regularity of our regime preserves health. The system becomes attuned to it, and there is no danger of its being upset for a constant variety of new and untested meats. Hence, there are those who, in cloistered life, live onto a vigorous old age. The last two oldest people in the world have been sisters. The last two. One, she must have died already because there's another one, and I don't think you can have two at the same time. There can only be one that's the oldest, but she was like 130. I can't remember. Maybe it was 120. I don't remember. Then there's another one. She's 100 and man, I don't know. See, my grandmother died 15 years ago, and she was 101, and this lady was born before my grandmother. She was born 1 year before my grandmother. She's still alive. She looks great. She looks like she's 85. Yeah, so the last two have been sisters, religious sisters. But now this appetite is wont to demand all sorts of fanciful and superfluous foods. The aim is no longer to support life, but to tickle the palate. Custom cuts both ways, and although in reality we should manage quite well with less, the least retrenchment is now regarded as hardship. We come to fancy ourselves as delicate and weak, as to be no longer able to subsist on plain food. Under the cloak of discretion, we begin without any misgivings to demand more dainty meals, and are unwilling to make the effort which would, by experience, convince us that our system, habitually for the moment to what is delicate, could by practice become equally habituated to a more moderate regime, such as suffices for many a man in the world. How many there live very sparingly? Jews, for example, or people in reduced circumstances. How often the latter find themselves in find themselves in as healthy a condition as ever they enjoyed when their nourishment was far richer. Now, it mentions Jews there because this was written in the 1200s, and so they would have been quite impoverished in certain areas because of that. All right, we can leave it there. The next one, spiritual joy and interior sweetness of soul. Or thought little of. You see, we don't mean to belittle what goes on in the world, but unfortunately, you see with the Christians today, Catholics, and you find it in religious life too, there's a lot of secularism that's come in. No longer, this is that conference I gave a couple weeks ago about, I think I talked about that recently, maybe a couple days ago. But the point being that we can't, we have to put our perspective back on what it means to be a Christian, not just to be Catholic and live like everybody else in the world, because they base it on law. People today base it on law. Well, show me where that's wrong. Show me where I'm not allowed to do that. It's keep the law, go to heaven. It doesn't work that way. Love God, conform yourself to God, live for God, and you go to heaven. Do you see? But that isn't what you find at the parishes today. It isn't what you find in the clergy today. It isn't what you find in the hierarchy today. You find everything based on law. And the young people all want to know, basically, what are the laws that I have to follow? Am I allowed to do this? Basically, what can I get away with and still be okay with God? If that's the way you think, you're not going to make it there anyways. Do you see? It's the point. Like we're given this opportunity to receive something beyond our comprehension. It's heaven. It's for all of eternity. And we don't even want to strive for the thing. People that want to win a marathon don't usually just sign up and think that they can just smoke cigarettes and eat all kinds of, and just eat at the Golden Corral all the time. and then go run the marathon and get some kind of reward. I know in high school now or grade school or whatever, everybody gets an award. You all play the soccer game. Half the people on the field lose, and they get an award just like the people who won. So, but that doesn't happen with marathons, at least not yet. Maybe in California, but it doesn't happen in most places in the world. So, it's definitely not that way for heaven. You either love God, strive for God, and are willing to give anything because He's good and deserves it, or you might not even make it. Do you see? It's not all about law. It's about love.